Good evening, everyone. DSP here. And the year that we call 2024 has come to a close. We're actually a few days here into the new year of 2025. And it is at this time of year that I like to reminisce. I like to think back about the year that was and everything that we did in it. Now, particularly 2024 was a unique year. Why was it unique? Because in the 16 years that I have been a YouTuber making content for the internet, I'm going to be honest with all of you. I thought it was one of the most disappointing gaming years of all time. And it's various reasons why. Number one, in some cases, there was just a massive oversaturation of the market of a similar kind of game, making it impossible to really enjoy all of them. Number two, a lot of AAA big game releases that I felt like we all were excited for and we're going to just smash it either got delayed or came out and completely underwhelmed. Number three, out of all of the games that came out of the year, it actually was, in this case, a lot of the indie-style games, the games that didn't have giant budgets or AAA studios behind them, that actually most impressed. And so I feel like 2024 was a shocking gaming year where you just could not actually predict what was going to be good, what you were going to be playing, what you were going to remember at the end. You know, during the course of the year, many people had said to me things such as, hey, Phil, what was your favorite game? What do you think will be your game of the year contenders? And by the end of the year, I was like, I don't even know. I legit don't even know. What I could say is some of the best stuff of this year. It was hard to have anything be remembered for more than just a month. And a lot of the stuff that was the best stuff was kind of samey, you know? It's sad when you think a major DLC for a game that was a game of the year contender or a lot of people's game of the year pick 2 years ago ends up being the best thing they've played this year. That's really weird. So this year I'm doing stuff a little different, okay? Why? Because this year, I really don't think I want to talk about the most disappointing games. I don't think I want to talk about the best games. I want to talk about playthroughs. Because when you look at the stuff that went really well or not well for me this year in gaming, a lot of it had to do not with the games themselves, but the playthroughs in general. What playthroughs crushed it and were fun and lasted a long time and everyone enjoyed and we had engagement and support and everyone just in their heads are going to remember those playthroughs for a long time. Compare that to the playthroughs that were the most disappointing. Now, I want you to understand something. We're about to do the top 20 most disappointing gaming playthroughs of 2024. That doesn't mean these games are bad. It could, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the game is bad. And I will try to explain in each situation, okay, what I actually mean by that. So if I say, oh, this game is one of the most disappointing playthroughs, I'll tell you if the game is good, but why the playthrough was disappointing. You see, there may be situations where the games are great and the playthroughs were still disappointing. Vice versa, there might be situations where the game were just terrible, but maybe the playthrough was good. That could also happen, okay? So I'm excited to count these down with you. And in fact, we have 20. Yes, 20 of each. 20 of the most disappointing playthroughs and 20 of the best playthroughs of the year. And so, without further ado, I believe it is time to begin, shall we? All right, ladies and gentlemen, the number 20 most disappointing playthrough of the year for me was Path of Exile 2. And of course, you're going to see me in stereo in some of these cases, but just listen to my voice synced with me here in the bottom right corner and you'll know which is the real Phil. So, Path of Exile 2. You might say, Phil, I don't get it. Why would this be one of the most disappointing playthroughs of the year for you? Okay. Well, there's two major reasons why. All right. Reason number one, I like Diablo-esque games. I like games where you do this top-down perspective. You're doing all kinds of RPG elements, combat, skill trees, exploration, and the loot. The loot is so addicting in games like this. You know, you just want to keep playing and killing the monsters or enemies so that you can get more cool loot. And that's part of the gameplay loop that hooks you, right? Back in the day, I played Diablo 1 and 2 on PC. That's right. In the 90s, I actually was a PC gamer. And I loved Diablo 1 and 2. I thought that they were addictive, fun, really great gameplay experiences. But these games have never really translated well ever since I've been a YouTuber. I tried it with Diablo 3. I tried it last year with Diablo 4. And essentially, when this game was coming out at the end of 2024, I was going to skip it. I had absolutely no intentions whatsoever to play this game. Okay? You guys convinced me to. People were like, no, if you miss out on Path of Exile 2, you're going to be missing out on one of the best games of the year. It's one of the most anticipated PC games in many, many years. You absolutely must play it. So I listened to your feedback, and I said, all right, I'm going to bite the bullet. Let's get it. And I bought it. It's early access, by the way, although the game apparently is pretty much done. People are saying you could play it through and actually enjoy the entirety of the game. I made this lightning monk style class, as you can see here, and I was really enjoying the graphics. The game performed very well on my PC. The gameplay elements were getting more interesting the further in that I got. At first it was just kind of basic punch and then charge up some abilities and use them. But then, as you can see, I started using chain lightning, and I started using this ice ability that would slow down enemies. And it was actually getting better and better and better. But the problem with these games, which I believe they're called AARPGs, something like that. The problem with these RPGs is as follows. Fun to play, addictive to play, not necessarily fun to watch. And I think that's exactly what happened here. Even though I had warned all of you, and I said, I don't think this is going to work for a playthrough. Diablo 3 and 4 didn't work, so I don't think this is going to work. But people were like, no, Phil, you should try it anyway. We want to see you play it. So I bought it. I played it for one stinking stream. Guess what happened during the stream? Attendance dipped. People got disengaged. The support was bad. And I'm like, that's kind of what I expected. It's unfortunate. I didn't want that to happen. I did my best. I tried to learn all the elements. I was trying to learn the class. The problem with a game like this is it's very attention demanding. Take a look. There's tons of enemies on the screen at once. They're all after you and can kill you if you're not careful. So you got to be paying attention. It's not a chill game or a laid back game in any way. You've got to be on your toes. Look at this. Enemies just come off the edges of the screen at any moment, and you got to be ready for it. So unlike a lot of other playthroughs where we could either relax or have some social interaction, sadly, this one didn't turn out like that. And it just ended up flopping. I now haven't, to this date, I haven't played it again. Even though I bought the game, I haven't played it a second time. And to be honest, guys, no one's asked me for it. Like, no one's really, saying, hey, what about Path of Exile 2 that you started? Are you ever going to continue it? Like, I don't think anyone's even said that to me. So it's sad because it's a game that I like. It plays like classic Diablo, which I enjoy, but the playthrough just didn't resonate with the audience, and that's why it makes it disappointing for me. Okay? It's not that the game's bad in any way, shape, or form. I like it, but hey, I got to play stuff that's going to resonate with my audience, correct? Okay. Number 19, most disappointing playthrough of the year. A game that most of you most likely do not remember even existed. It is called Silent Hill: The Short Message. So for those who did not watch me play it, this was relatively early on in 2024. It was actually a free game. All right. Now, the reason that it was hype at the time was because at this time, Silent Hill 2 Remake hadn't come out, and we were all looking forward to and craving Silent Hill content. We all wanted more Silent Hill content. When this was announced that it was going to be a free game that was coming out and you're going to be able to be sucked back into the world of Silent Hill and all of its survival horror, but that it was going to be a first-person game that had, exploration element and a deep story, it was very intriguing. Hey, this sounds good to me. Plus, it's free. So when it's a free game, it's like you can't really get too upset, correct? Why would you get upset if it's free? When I started playing it, I actually really liked it. Like the beginning of the game, I felt was very, very interesting. It had this whole mystery aspect of, are the people or the girls involved in this storyline alive or dead? What really happened at this school? What is going on? Is this girl trapped in Silent Hill or a parallel dimension? Or, plus there actually aren't many or any enemies until nearly the end of the game. So it actually makes you feel like a slow build towards actual risk of something that's going to be coming after you. So here's the deal. I would argue first 2 hours out of this 3.5-hour experience are pretty good. However, the critical flaw in this game is the final 45 minutes, because in the final 45 minutes, they send you on a crazy chase. Now, I don't think that I actually caught that here. Actually, I did. Here it is. Wow, I grabbed the right video. So, in this final 45 minutes, as you can see, number one, the game's performance dips. You're in this crazy chase where the enemy is after you constantly, and you have to be running around perfectly, because if not, the enemy will grab you, and then you have to start the whole chase over. But the graphics start to dip, and the frame rate starts to suffer. At the critical moment when you need it to be the best, it actually starts to suffer, and that's unfortunate. Now, the problem is you have to run through this maze-like area. You have no idea where you are because there's no map. So you're just trying to get your bearings. If you make a wrong turn, oops, the enemy grabs you. You got to start completely over. Like, you literally have to keep moving at all times. If you stop, this enemy can grab you, and then you're starting over. The problem is, in this area, you have to grab a ton of stuff. You have to end up grabbing items and all kinds of things in this area. And if you don't grab them in the right order, guess what? You can't make progress. So what this ends up actually being is you, through trial and error, multiple times failing, okay? Basically, you have to keep trying over and over. And it becomes this tedious, endless loop, and it's very boring. It's frustrating. It's like, why is it like this? The rest of the game wasn't like this. It was actually better. This last sequence, no, don't get me wrong. The last sequence is creepy because there's finally a monster coming after you trying to kill you. But it is so tedious, and the gameplay is just so outdated. Do you really want to redo this area over and over and over? Well, guess what? It took me nearly 45 minutes to beat this final segment. If I had known exactly where to go and what order to do it in, I probably would have beaten it in 5 minutes. But instead, I had to redo it and redo it and redo it and redo it. Very frustrating for anyone trying to beat this game after having sunk about 2 to 3 hours into it up to that point. And then lastly, on top of all of that, without spoiling the ending, it's a cliffhanger ending that doesn't truly explain how the game ended. So just think of it this way. You are investing all of this time, all of this effort to beat this final chase. You're getting so frustrated because you die a bunch of times, you have to keep redoing it. And then you get to the ending that you've earned, your big deserved reward, and it's not a clear ending. You don't actually know what happened, and the game just ends in the credits roll, and it's incredibly disappointing. If anything, I've said this before, and I'll say it many, many more times, I'm sure, in the future. When you're investing your time into a game, especially if it's a game that's challenging or seems like you've gone through a journey, you want to have a good ending. You cannot have a wish-washy ending, and this game has the ultimate unspecific wish-washy ending. It's very disappointing, and it makes you feel like, man, maybe I shouldn't have spent the last 3.5 hours playing it, even if it was free. It doesn't feel like they really put the effort in to give it an ending that was worth your time. Very frustrating, and it just stacked up to be one of the most disappointing games after I beat it, because I was like, man, I wish that I kind of had done anything else. I feel like maybe I would have had a better use of my time rather than wasting 3.5 hours. What's up, everyone? I see a lot more people have joined the stream. Welcome to anyone who is joining here in progress. These are the top 20 most disappointing playthroughs of 2024, and we got through the first 2. Ready to continue? Retro Danny says it reminded me of PT. I mean, and that's the thing. A lot of these survival horror games that are first person are basically trying to emulate what PT did. You know, PT was the innovator, and everyone else kind of chased behind PT, which is funny because PT was just a playable teaser that never actually sold for anything. But yeah, definitely those kind of vibes. Okay, shall we continue? All right. My number 18 most disappointing playthrough of the year was Marvel Rivals. Now you might say, wait, what? Marvel Rivals? Marvel Rivals is like the hottest game right now. Marvel Rivals has record numbers of players on Steam. People are playing the heck out of it, really loving it. And honestly, it's a pretty good game. It's basically classic Overwatch-style gameplay. The only difference being, as you can see, it's third person rather than first person, and it stars Marvel characters and properties. So why would Marvel Rivals stack up to be one of my most disappointing playthroughs of the year? Well, first off, I played it twice. I first played this game during the summertime when it had an open beta, and I actually liked it during the open beta. Then I came back to it later in the year when it had a full release in December, and I was having a good time with it. I liked playing all the different characters. I liked messing around with the different mechanics. I thought that the different Marvel aspects of it were actually quite neat. And although I'll be honest, in some cases, I feel certain characters weren't really representative of what they are in the Marvel universe, i.e., like Magneto, who in this game is very different from how he would, used in a comic book. But basically, I really enjoyed it. And so, why is it disappointing? Because both times I played it, both in the summer and at the end of the year, I basically got initial interest where people were showing up and liking it and engaging with it and supporting it for a couple streams, maybe like 2 to 3 streams each. And then when I got to about the 10-hour gameplay mark, I noticed a distinct, not necessarily boredom, but stagnation. People got to a point where they were like, we've seen enough. Every time you play, even though you're using different characters, it's not really that different. It's just Overwatch. Now, listen, I'll admit it has an incredible amount of similarities to Overwatch, okay? But it's good still. Like, that doesn't mean that it's bad. I mean, Overwatch, when it was at its prime in 2016, 2017, was one of the biggest games on the planet. It won Game of the Year at the Game of the Year Awards. People were having merchandise in the mainstream. I mean, hell, I'm not even kidding you. I had a car sunshade that said Overwatch. It was so popular, you could just buy it at a normal store. It was on the level of games like Minecraft and stuff like that. Or I guess you would say, or Fortnite today. So then why does no one talk about Fortnite anymore? Excuse me. Why does no one talk about Overwatch anymore? Well, because Activision Blizzard ran it into the ground and ruined it. And now very few people talk about it or play it compared to what was like, 7, 8 years ago. So in the case of this, Marvel Rivals, this is a game that takes those great things from Overwatch and then on top of that applies flashy graphics and a really good Marvel, IP and combines it into a winning formula. So then why on earth won't people watch me play it? Why do people complain that it's boring, repetitive, and why do people not support? Don't really know, except people just say it's too much like Overwatch. So maybe in this case, it just really is a little bit too much. At the same time, when I look at this, I'm like, I feel like the game would have been better in first person, just being honest. Like, I think the third person aspect was their excuse to say they didn't blatantly copy Overwatch, even though it's apparent they actually did. But basically, I think the game is fun, and I'm disappointed because I actually was having fun picking new characters. As you can see, I was picking characters like Iron Fist or Venom or Scarlet Witch or Hawkeye, and I was enjoying learning these new characters and how to play with them. And at the end there, I had actually adjusted to keyboard and mouse, and I was actually getting even better with keyboard and mouse. And then I just had a stream where no one cared. And I was like, well, I can't continue to play a game that no one cares about. It's sad. So again, at least this one lasted like 12 hours each time that I played it. But man, just to be honest, again, this is very similar to Path of Exile, where I liked the game. I wanted to keep playing it. It didn't resonate with the audience. And I got to do what my audience tells me. I'm here to be an interactive live streamer. I'm not here to just stream for myself. I got to play games you guys are going to show up for and enjoy. In the case of Marvel Rivals, sadly, that only lasted about 10 hours. And then I had to move on. Retro Danny says, Marvel Rivals gives me good memories of the original Overwatch. I'm still salty that Activision Blizzard ran it to the ground. Yeah, I know. I remember original Overwatch. It was quite good, wasn't it? It really was a great game. And it's sad that it ended up being what it was after just a couple of years. Too many changes, too many, things giving into whiny players. And and then, of course, Overwatch League. And that dictated how the game was going to progress and play with new content and stuff. And yeah, it's just sad. Okay. Let's continue on, my friends. Up next, number 17, most disappointing playthrough of 2024 was, you may not even know what this is yet. You ready? The campaign of Call of Duty Black Ops 6. All right? I was so disappointed by the campaign for a couple of reasons. Number one, a lot of people had told me that it was good. And I was like, oh, if it's good, then I can't wait. I can't wait to play this campaign. Call of Duty usually is one of the biggest bang for your buck packages of any game all year. You get your single player campaign, you get your multiplayer, you get your zombies, you get your battle royale in Warzone, and all of that is varied and different. And so, that's a great amount of content for $60. In this case, now I guess it's $70. And this year it was on Game Pass. It's like, so what's to lose, right? So I played the campaign. The whole first 45 minutes is a puzzle. They literally throw you into a mansion, which is your new base of operations. and they're like, here's a puzzle to solve. Now, you don't have to solve it, but obviously if it's thrown in your face, here it is, you want to solve it. So I ended up 45 minutes trying to solve this puzzle with black lights and secret codes and things like that. And then they throw you into the game, and what's the first level? Stealth, where you're creeping around like Hitman or the character from Dishonored, and you're trying to not get detected and to take down a few guys, but basically not cause a ruckus. Everything that's like the antithesis of Call of Duty. Oh yeah, here's the level that I wanted to show you. Doesn't this look like Call of Duty to you? Yeah, when you're like James Bond and you're going undercover into presidential political rallies and you're committing espionage and stuff. Yeah, that's Call of Duty, right? The weirdest part about it is once you get through these parts and later on you actually get to parts that have gunplay in them, the gunplay sucks. The gunplay is boring and repetitive. And listen, I understand that it's Call of Duty, right? Call of Duty is meant to just be kind of a run and gun game. But I'll be honest, I've played the campaigns of most of these. I didn't play last year's Modern Warfare 2 because I heard it was atrociously bad. Or was it Modern Warfare 3? Whichever last year's was. But I played pretty much every campaign up to now. I tried, guys. I really tried playing this campaign. I couldn't stand it. I was literally falling asleep, so bored playing this game that I just didn't care. I just can't play it anymore. So I quit it. Again, something that I was told by so many people was good. And then when I went to test it, it's like every single thing that doesn't feel like Call of Duty. And then when it gets to the parts that are like Call of Duty, they're incredibly repetitive and boring, uninspired, no real interesting set pieces or anything. Instead, it was just like, what happened here? So, big disappointment for me. When I bought the Call of Duty package, I was hoping to respectfully get, content out of all of it. And I'm never going back to the campaign. It just sucked. I don't know what else to say. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people liked it and disagree with me, but that's my opinion. Okay. Okay. The number 16 most disappointing playthrough of 2024, Hellblade 2, Senua's Saga. Or was it Senua's Sacrifice? Or was it Senua? Does anyone even remember? And I think this is the point that I want to make. When they said they were making a sequel to Hellblade, I think people got excited. They're like, whoa, well, Hellblade was an original game for Xbox One. The graphics at the time were absolutely outstanding. It had an interesting visual style, a bunch of cool puzzles and combat, simple, but still interesting and fun. And it had a very unique perspective where the main character probably has some level of mental illness, hallucinating things, hearing voices in her head. And so you have to ask, what is really going on? Is anything you're seeing real, or is this all in her head? Poor Senua could be suffering a mental breakdown right now. Like right now, this orb that she's putting into a stand, is this real? Is she imagining this? You don't know. Are you even going to ever get answers for that? Probably not, okay? So the first game, Hellblade 1, was great for the time. Hellblade 2 came out in 2024 on the Xbox Series S and X, and here, this is representative of me playing it on the Xbox Series X for the record. As you can see, outside of the lighting elements, do you notice something? First off, the game is locked at 30 frames per second. That is insanely stupid. If this is supposed to be a truly next-gen game, this is supposed to be a flagship title for Microsoft under their umbrella, you need the game to perform up to standard, and it doesn't. Running at only 30 frames per second is completely unacceptable in 2024. The game should have been running at 60. I don't care about how much lighting and the detail. It has to run at 60 frames to be considered a viable, top-tier style game, and it doesn't. Number two, sadly, the game just didn't do enough to really impress or innovate. In fact, if you play this one compared to the first one, it's almost the same. There's a few distinct differences. For example, there's some big boss fights. However, the boss fights just kind of water down to very simple puzzles rather than actual challenging, interesting fights. And once again, in regards to the gameplay elements and the story, it's pretty much just another version of the first game. They don't really innovate. There's nothing really added that's so different or groundbreaking. It kind of feels like you're just continuing on with the first game. This very well could have been sold as a DLC or presented as one for the first game, and I don't think anyone would have noticed the difference. And in fact, I think that's the most notable thing. The first Hellblade game came out so many years ago. This one just came out last year, and do you see major upgrade in the graphics? No. And the graphics are what the first game was mostly known for. Let's also be honest. Do you see anything too groundbreaking with the game or the actor's performance? No, it's pretty standard, right? She won Performer of the Year. Why? Why would the Game Awards award her Performer of the Year for a subpar game, a subpar story, and it just felt like it was a carbon copy of the first? Like, what happened? I don't know. So this was a game that I was so disappointed in. I was actually hyped for it. I really liked Hellblade 1, and I thought it was going to be more of that same level of greatness, and instead it just kind of fizzled and fell on its face and just wasn't that good. Okay. Continuing on, folks. My number 15 most disappointing playthrough of the year was... Oh, that's right. I know you guys are probably going to be like, what? Multiverses. Okay? So, for the record, Multiverses is a game that actually was out years ago in early access / beta, right? When the game finally had a full release this year, a lot of people were questioning whether it was going to be well received and was it going to be a good game or not. I was one of them. You know, I liked Multiverses many years ago. What was it, like 2.5 years ago when it was in that open state? I actually liked the variety of characters that were in it, their different play styles. I just found it very enjoyable. So what happened with Multiverses when it came out was that you had two distinct groups of people. Some people were curious to see this is going to be a full release game that was going to be worth playing. And others just immediately said, well, we already saw this 2 years ago. We know exactly what the game is. And they feel like it's just a kind of a knockoff of Smash Brothers that will never live up to the level of competitive gameplay or hype of Smash Brothers. And therefore, they just immediately wrote it off and said, it sucks. So for me, I landed somewhere in the middle because I was definitely curious with the final release and these new characters, such as you can see the Banana Guard and Jason Voorhees. You know, were they going to be good? Were they going to significantly change the way the game was played? You know, it was going to be pretty exciting. When it released, I did play it a good amount. And immediately I noticed some distinct changes to the game that I didn't like. As you can see, this weird color filter over teams. I didn't understand what they were doing with this. And I actually believe what happened is they fixed it. And now this color filter is gone or toned down because everyone complained that it was way too strong and very, very, like annoying. No one liked this color filter. In addition, the game played decently, but it had some lag issues for sure. I wish that it didn't have as many lag issues. But for the most part, it played pretty similarly, I would say, to the original from a couple years ago, the early access that is, with a few distinct disappointments. For example, one of my favorite characters of that early release was Velma, and Velma is absolutely terrible in this final version of the game. They nerfed the living crap out of her to the point where, like, there's no point in her even being in the game. That's how bad she actually is. Now, lucky for me, certain characters like Bugs Bunny, who was one of my other big favorites, actually is quite good in the final release. But again, the problem here was a game like this is going to require a lot of time investment to learn how to play it. There's a lot of character selection. You know, this is sounding familiar, kind of like Marvel Rivals, where you got to play different characters, learn, take time to learn and get good and stuff like that. And guess what happened? I basically played it twice. And by the time that I wanted to play it a third time, everyone said, stop playing this game. It's just a Smash Brothers knockoff. It's just another game that plays similarly to another game. It's not very good. Drop it. And you know what? I'll be honest. I wish that people had been more open-minded because I think I would have liked it if I had tried more characters and played it longer. It just seems like with my audience, either a game immediately resonates and is a hit, or people just don't like it at all. And sadly, that's what happened with this game, just like Marvel Rivals, where I was enjoying it. I wanted to try new characters. I was having a good time. But after a couple of streams, everyone got bored with it, okay? So what's funny about it, though, is that apparently the game did not do well. Someone even just said they just checked right now. Only 700 people are playing this game on Steam. It has completely and utterly failed, and no one is playing it. That's pretty bad for a game that had this kind of a hype and budget put behind it. All these IPs were purchased and licensed to be in the game. The fact that this game right now is a failure and no one's really talking about it or playing it is pretty darn sad. So, Multiverses came up a flop. It sucks because there was 2.5 years of anticipation, and I was very excited for it, but sadly, it didn't resonate. And again, another one that ended up getting dropped because people just didn't like it. Brian asked, do you think that game devs deserve a second chance so they can sort out a game like this after release? Listen, in this game, it's free. You didn't pay anything for it. So I'm down with the game coming out and having issues that they want to tweak and get better because it's free. Now, if you paid $70 for that game and it came out unfinished, wonky, and messed up, then you've got a problem. But the fact that it's free, I don't really have too many complaints. I think that it was a good game. I really do. Okay. Retro Danny says he agrees the color filter was annoying, and also he didn't like that certain characters were nerfed. So there you go. Okay. All right, folks. Up next, the number 15, excuse me, the number 14 most disappointing game playthrough of the year for me. That's right. I think you recognize it. Dragon Age: The Veilguard. For someone who liked all of the Dragon Age games up to now, including Origins, 2, Inquisition, this game I actually got hyped for because it's been so long, nearly a decade since the last Dragon Age game came out. And we heard so much about it over the years and then just kind of absolutely nothing, right? It was like radio silent for a while. And so all of a sudden, there started to be a blitz of information in the last like 6 to 8 months about this game. Like, uh-oh, this is so weird that we heard nothing. Now, all of a sudden, everything at once, does that mean something bad, right? Now, incidentally, a viewer of mine wanted to see me try this game so badly, they freaking donated a PS5 Pro for me to play it on. Didn't need a PS5 Pro because I had a gaming PC by then, but they really wanted to see me try out this game on there to see how it would perform. To be honest, as you can see, it performs really well. This game actually runs incredibly well on the PS5 Pro. I didn't have any issues with frame drops or graphics. I think actually its strongest suit was actually the graphics, that they were so good that I was really enjoying that aspect of the game. But my problem with Dragon Age: The Veilguard is very simple. It is an incredibly slow-moving, snail's-pace game. I probably played it for around 15 hours, maybe 20, and I couldn't even tell you what was going on with the story. Let's see. 2 elven gods were released from some kind of alternate dimension, and they were trying to take over the world, and you were just working with allies to try to stop them, except literally in the first 20 hours, you do absolutely nothing to stop them. You end up doing side quests, busy work, and filler content that have nothing to do whatsoever with your end goals of the plot. So what you're telling you is this game's going to be like 100 hours long. You're going to spend 80 of those hours not actually doing the main story. Is that okay? Well, I guess if the story was engaging and immersive or whatever. But for me, I found it hard to even remember what I was doing in certain areas. The map kind of sinks into other areas, and so it kind of all blends together because it all is kind of a seamless world, which could usually work, except in this case, you end up stumbling upon another quest, and then another half of a quest, and then a boss challenge here, and then this here. And half the time, you don't even know what you're doing or if you're doing the right thing for the quest you were trying to do or not, and it just ends up this kind of endless time sink. In fact, I would almost argue that is the best way that this game could be described. It's a time sink. If you're looking for a game where you can just kind of gel and not really care about what you're doing, but you want some flashy graphics, some interesting gameplay elements, and screw the story, that's good. That's Dragon Age: The Veilguard. But if you're there for a riveting, gripping storyline, it's just not there, at least not in the first 20 hours. And I'm sorry, I'm just not going to keep sinking time into a game where I just don't know what's going on and I'm bored, and that's the problem ultimately is the gameplay loop's addictive, the graphics are good, but the story is boring. Do you want a boring story in a 100-hour RPG? It's pretty much going to be a major focus of the game, so why the holy heck is the story so boring? Now, I'm well aware that this game also has elements that are incredibly leftist-leaning politically and culturally. Apparently, there's this big woke moment that we all watched and reacted to on my podcast at one point. And to be honest, I wish that wasn't in there because a lot of people have written the game off because of that content, okay? For me, I've been saying this recently, keep politics out of my games. I don't want politics or culture wars in my games. I just want my games to be fantasy so I can unplug from reality and have a good time in a game. I don't want to boot up a game and be like, oh, now I got to deal with people saying that this person is trans and that's bad or good. Is this person represented well? Do you remember the pronouns? It's a fantasy video game. I want to escape from all the chaos of reality and not have to think about any of that shit when I'm playing the game. So the game misses the mark when it tries to shove those kind of topics down your throat. Now, I am happy to report, again, in the 20 hours that I played, I didn't encounter any of that content. It must be further into the game. So I'm glad that at the very least it's not shoved down your throat at the beginning. But still, The fact that it's in there, you knew it was going to be a thing of contention. And the thing is, the game devs knew it too. I think that BioWare, in this case, wanted the game to be talked about no matter what. And they were possibly afraid that if they didn't put that kind of content in the game, maybe people would say it was kind of a subpar game and wouldn't care about it and wouldn't talk about it. So they had to wedge that stuff in to get it to be the hot topic about the game and cause controversy around it so that people would discuss it. And it worked. People absolutely discussed this game for about a month. And now it's as if it never existed. You can get it for a very deep discount everywhere. And it's sad because for a game that has like 100 hours of content and looks this good, you would think that the effort would have been put in all around. But sadly, it looks like the gameplay was the focus, not the story. If you don't have a good story in a game that's a role-playing game, hence, you want to play the role of a character in a fantasy setting and, live their story. Well, if I don't care about their story, then your RPG has failed. And that's the main problem with Dragon Age the Veilguard. No one really cares about the characters, so why play the game? That's why I dropped it. I was so bored, I just didn't want to continue. Okay, so I have a couple shout outs to do, and then we're going to continue with our countdown. Thank you to the following couple of people. So we start with a $20 tip from Mars Inhabitant. There's a $1 donation for every disappointing game. There you go. So $20 because there's 20 disappointing games. Well, it's actually 20 disappointing playthroughs. Because as I've already stated, some of these games I liked. Marvel Rivals, I wasn't disappointed by that game. Sadly, I was disappointed by the reception that it got as a playthrough. So a little bit of a different situation. Thank you, Mars Inhabitant, for the $20 tip. However, you might be thinking, well, that's our top tip, right? No, it is not. No, it is not. Because, ladies and gentlemen, oops, was that 22? I think it was 22, right? So now I think we're at 22. I received another tip, a $50 tip from Lisa Lou. Thank you so much to Lisa Lou for a $50 tip tonight. Thank you for your contribution and for supporting my content and, of course, your end series. Appreciate that very, very much. Let's go ahead and get Lisa Lou on the leaderboard. So now we are about halfway to our goal for the night, my friends. Thank you so much for the support. 72 out of the 150 goal. Remember, if we hit the goal, counts towards our rewards, and then we get rewards sooner. All right? Cool. Excellent. Thank you so much to Mars Inhabitant and to Lisa Lou. All right, continuing on here. I guess we're playing this again, are we? No, we are not. Absolutely not. Our next most disappointing playthrough of the year. The 13th most disappointing playthrough was Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero free 0-calorie cola. Is it just me, or did Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero sound like a low-calorie beverage? It totally did to me. Like, that's what I thought it was. The name is just such a bizarre name, okay? All right. So why Dragon Ball Sparking Zero? Why is this on the countdown of the most disappointing playthroughs of the year? By the way, good evening, Jade. Good to see you. And good evening, Bookworm. He says, the ticker-style contributions bar is growing on him. Cool. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. So why? Why this game? Why this countdown? Okay? I'll tell you why. Because I haven't played a Dragon Ball game in many years. I played a few. I played Kakarot. I played Xenoverse 1 and 2. And I may have even played one more years ago. I know I played Dragon Ball Fighters as well. Their actual 2v2 2D fighting game. Okay? You might say, well, why then was I not interested in this one? Because every time that there's a Dragon Ball game, it's literally the same story. You relive the same classic events where Goku and his friends are trying to defend the world from invading enemies like Vegeta and Nappa, and then it turns into the Frieza saga and the Cell saga and the Android saga and the freaking Boo saga, and the same stuff. And I've now relived that plot line so many times. I'm just not that interested in it anymore. As a kid when I was growing up, I loved Dragon Ball anime, but I just don't see the appeal of living the same events over 7,000 times. So when this game was coming out, people sold me on it and said, no, Phil, you don't understand. The campaign of this game is very different. This campaign is actually going to be you doing what if scenarios where you can actually do things differently than they actually happened in the real anime. And therefore you could see alternate scenarios. Well, that was there definitely present. Problem was the game didn't explain how to do it. So half the time you'd get these scenarios by accident and then realize you played yourself into a corner and had to replay a stage repetitively over and over to unlock another scenario to continue on with the game. That's frustrating. Sadly, it's pretty outdated game design. I don't really know what they were going for there. So by the time that I had grinded through and finally completed Goku's plot line, I was so exhausted, I wasn't too interested in doing any others, okay? Now, you want to talk about the online play? Well, you're seeing a bit of it right here. The game has an insanely large roster of characters. And the way that it works is essentially you are making a balanced team. Each character has a ranking number. So you could pick a very powerful character, but that character has a high ranking number, meaning you're going to be able to pick less characters than, say, if you picked a team with all 5 low-ranked characters. I compare this to the team-based system that they used in the Capcom versus SNK series many, many years ago, where you could have like a rank 1 or ratio 1, ratio 2 character, but then you could have a team of 4 ratio 1s or only 1 ratio 4. So it's kind of a similar premise. The problem is, none of it really matters, because once you get online and you start playing, all the combat looks just like this. Basically, everyone just goes at each other and spams. And yes, there is some strategy to it, don't get me wrong. There's different classes of characters. There's faster characters, there's more projectile trapping characters, there's more tankish characters. I'm actually using a tankish character in this video, a giant robot that has super armor, okay? But ultimately, it's an incredibly simplistic game. Does it have nuances to the control scheme? Yes, but here's what it basically boils down to. Attack, attack, attack until someone presses an escape button. Then they try to counterattack you, but then you can do your own escape, and that's it. I'm not kidding. That's the game. Like, it's just attack, counterattack, counterattack, counterattack. Oops, we're all out of energy. Got to run away and recharge, and then go at each other again. There definitely is a higher level strategy to it, but the point I'm making here is it's just not a very fun fighting game, which is essentially what you're trying to do is make a game that has elements that are fun, and it just becomes kind of a real repetitive experience. And here's the other part that's really stupid. You would think in a game like this, right? You'd want to pick the powerful characters. But no, the best way to play this game online was to pick a team of weaker characters who basically can do good combos and just drag it out. I mean, hell, I played this game a grand total of twice online. Ladies and gentlemen, I won the vast majority of the matches, and a lot of them, I didn't even know what happened. I didn't know how I won. And then people would explain to me, well, Phil, you had a team of low-ranked characters and time expired, so because you had 3 characters alive and they only had 1, you won. I was like, yeah, but literally they spanked me. They were kicking my ass the whole time. No, you won. You have more health. Like, what? It didn't make sense. The online play just doesn't make sense unless you sit there and study it. But here's the thing, and here's what I was saying at the time that the game came out. The game really feels like a masher. It totally does. It feels like a button masher. And when you're playing a button masher, you're going to play it as a party game, right? You're going to team up with your friends. You're going to jump into it, mess around with the various characters for a little bit. And after you mess it around as a party game, you're probably never going to pick it up and touch it ever again. But so many people when the game released were like, oh, it's going to be a competitive fighter. You've got to invest time in it and all of that. But that's never happened. Like, did you know that within 1 month of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero came out, they lost over 90% of the player base? Did you hear what I just said? I'm going to repeat myself. You ready? Over 90% of the player base quit this game within 1 month. That is not the sign of a game that was made to be competitive. That is not the sign of a healthy game. That is the sign of a game that ultimately was a party game. Everyone bought it, played it a little bit, got bored, never went back. And that's sad. I feel like it would have been a better game if they had sound mechanics, if they had a team-based structure that made sense, but they weren't going for that. They were kind of going for a dream match. Every character possible in there. Who cares if it's balanced? Let everything murder each other. A lot of people said, well, this is very similar to the original Dragon Ball Budokai experience. Well, if anything, can we just agree on something then? Maybe Dragon Ball Budokai was made in the past for a reason. It's outdated. It's not a formula that really works in 2024 when people are looking for a game that's going to have bang for your buck value, competitive edge in nature. It just doesn't have any of those things. So because of that, 90% of the people are going to play it once or twice and put it out. I mean, I think that's a bigger player fall off than Mortal Kombat 1 had, quite frankly. So yeah, sorry to say, a game that I had high expectations for. You guys hyped me up for it, and it really let me down. I honestly wish that the game had been a lot better than it was, and that I would have played it more than I had. I only played through the campaign once and online once or twice, and I was done with it, and no one seemed to care. That's the other funny part, too. It's like, oh, maybe Phil, like, prematurely quit the game, but in this case, only maybe one or two people ever mentioned it ever again. So pretty disappointing. I think now you're definitely starting to see the pattern here. Either it's games that I really liked but somehow didn't resonate with the audience, or games that the audience thought was going to be great, but then when I actually bought them and played them, they ended up not being very good at all, right? So pretty big disappointments. Dio says, my nephew had his parents pay something like $80 to get the special version of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Played it twice. Went back to playing free mobile games. Never touched it ever again. Wow. Okay, let's continue on. The most disappointing playthroughs countdown of 2020. Here we go. 2024. Number 12 is, yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, Dragon's Dogma 2. A game that I was pretty hyped for, because many years ago, I had played Dragon's Dogma 1, and actually really ended up enjoying it. I had played the crap out of this game. I grinded offline to get better at it, and then I recorded my progress as an offline YouTuber back then. This was before I was a live streamer. I liked the fact that you could have these created characters called pawns that people from all across the globe had actually created, and they could join your party. I liked the world structure with all the towns and all the different things that you could do. The open world, we could jump on enemies and take them out with co-op gameplay mechanics and the like. There was just a lot to like about Dragon's Dogma. The problem is that Dragon's Dogma came out over a decade ago. Okay? So if you're going to make a modern game in 2024, well, you've got to pretend like the last decade has happened. Dragon's Dogma 2 acts like the last decade never happened. An incredibly flawed graphical performance. As you can see here, this is the Xbox Series X version running at the absolute highest graphics, and it's choppy as hell. It's just not acceptable. The game has an open world that's very similar to the first game. The game has pawns like the first game. And essentially, if you're playing Dragon's Dogma 2, the one fatal flaw is pretty simple. It's basically the first game again. Even graphically, it looks like the first game. And that's not a good thing. Things have advanced and changed and gotten much, much better in the last decade. Why were none of those interesting improvements added to the game? Why are they acting like this game came out a year after the first Dragon's Dogma? The fact that they charge full price for it also is just disappointing. If they had sold it as like a $30, $40 game, maybe I would have forgiven some of its shortcomings, but they're selling it as if it's a full-fledged sequel. It's not. And the funny part about it is the game came out, people talked about it for about a week, and then it's like it never existed. Like, I don't remember, no one talked about it again. Everyone just kind of gave up on it. So, yeah, pretty disappointing, quite frankly. It was a game that I was very much looking forward to because I really liked the first one, but I'm sorry, if you're not going to make any gameplay improvements and even graphical improvements in a decade, your game's just inferior. No one's going to want to play it. And, this was a case where people got bored of the playthrough, but I was bored long before. I was willing to try to tough it out if people liked it, but everyone was bored with it, including me, and that's why we dropped it. If I'm going to continue to play a game and invest a bunch of time in it, it has to be a game that on both sides we're both enjoying, and this was sadly just one that neither side was enjoying. Dragon's Dogma 2 was a humongous and utter disappointment, I feel, to the RPG community because, again, the first one innovated, and this one just did more of the same of the first. So, there you have it. And so, we are nearing the end of our first 10 most disappointing playthroughs. What could possibly be on the list next? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's Dragon's Dogma 2 because it's so bad I included it twice. No. Up next, the number 11 most disappointing playthrough of 2024 was Star Wars: The Battlefront Collection. Ladies and gentlemen, I loved the Star Wars Battlefront games back in the 2000s. They were classics, and I actually played them on PC. While a lot of people had actually played them on consoles, I played the full-fledged PC versions, which were great games for the time. being able to select a class of character that is very different. Well, you have the person who's shooting rockets, or the sniper, or someone with a full auto gun, sneaking around in stealth and doing takedowns and stuff from behind. Pretty good. So when they announced that they were re-releasing these original Battlefront games in a collection, I got pretty stoked, and I was pretty excited for it. And then when it came out, what you're seeing is what we got. A game that ran incredibly buggy, very bad frame rate in parts, very poor performing, which makes no sense. The games are old. Why are they performing poorly on modern hardware? The game was absolutely full of bugs, unfinished messes, things phasing in and out of existence, getting stuck in walls, having all kinds of problems. It really was disappointing because they hyped it up like it was going to be these games getting more attention. But instead, they were horrible versions of the games. Don't get me wrong. Battlefront 1 and 2 are great games. Okay? They are. They're outstanding. But I'd like you to take a look at how this game performs. This is not, oh, this is running choppy. This is how the game ran and looked on modern hardware. It's feels like an unfinished port, right? Like they ported it badly and chugging along. Again, bugs and graphical issues. There was entire times where walls wouldn't load, or you get stuck in a wall. And the funny part was, even with as buggy as it was, I still had fun with it. You want to know why? Because the games are that good. Like Battlefront 1 and 2 are legitimately great games. So even though these were far inferior versions of said games, I still had a great time playing them. It's just a shame that if they were going to make a modern collection, they couldn't actually do the games justice. For people who never played the originals and only played these, you might think, oh man, what a wonky mess. Now, yes, the game did have some wonkiness to it, and that was part of its charm. But man, the original games were actually much better versions than this modern one that they sold us. So pretty disappointing. And quite frankly, these game pretty much died after like 3 weeks. I tried to keep playing it, but less and less people wanted to play it because it just was such a mess that wasn't really improving or getting any kind of notable patches or fixes. So because of that, people were like, well, I don't even want to really play it anymore. And so the player base fell off. Jade even just said in chat, yeah, I got sick watching you play this. I don't blame you. When the frame rate is all over the place like this game was, if it can't just be smooth and consistent, you're going to have issues with, with that kind of stuff and give you a headache, right? You're trying to play, oh, my eyes are burning. I can't even pay attention because the game's just not smooth enough. So pretty big disappointment. Again, you're going to sell a collection that's supposed to present these classic games to a new audience. Put the effort in. They obviously didn't. They obviously just wanted to rush out a botched port job. And that's just very, very unfortunate. I feel like they should have done a better job. Okay, I'm in Seattle tonight, by the way, live broadcasting from above Seattle. I'm actually in a helicopter broadcasting. Okay. Retro Danny says the classic Star Wars Battlefront games were my favorite. I love Star Wars Battlefront 2. It was badass. The first game was good too, but I like the second one more. Well, the second one had more of the focus on the heroes, right? The heroes were much better in the second game, and it had more game modes too. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that is the first half of my most disappointing game playthroughs of 2024 countdown. In part 2, we get down to the nitty-gritty. Get top 10 worst playthrough. So I hope you'll stick around. If you're watching here on stream, thanks for being a great audience. The first half is about to end. If you're watching on YouTube, I hope that you'll check out part 2, since I am going to split the part around an hour. Seems to be the sweet spot for YouTube processing. But I'll be back with the finale in the next part. I hope to see ya. And thanks for watching.